Are you curious about becoming an international educator? Have you looked at the process and thought, that sounds like a lot of change? That would require a certain amount of grit, determination, and perseverance on my part. Meet Jessica Simmons, who has demonstrated excellent stick-to-itiveness by attempting, on 3 separate occasions over a 4-year period, to take the leap into the international education sector, and is now, finally, on the point of going global with her family. Jessica is truly a go-getter. She persevered in following her dream until it became a reality. She embodies the spirit of an international educator, curious, adventurous, flexible, and willing to think beyond the regular realm. Her new school in Abuja, Nigeria, will be lucky to have her as a drama educator and leader. Check out the show notes for Jessica's full biography. This episode was recorded on June 23rd, 2023, June 24th in Australia. Join us now as we hear Jessica, her husband, and their children share their thoughts about going global.
Hello, Jessica, and welcome to the Educators Going Global podcast. We're super excited to connect around the world. We know where you are. Could you tell our audience where you are?
I'm in far north Queensland, Australia.
Excellent. I was there many years ago and just had a wonderful time enjoying the wildlife and enjoying going out and meeting some of your fellow Australians. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. I'm so excited. You're our furthest guest.
Really?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Jessica, one of the things we enjoy hearing are going global stories. Do you have one to share with our listeners?
Yes. I think the most important going global story that I can tell is that my mother inspired me. And she regrets this now because she's about to lose a daughter overseas, which she's not very happy about. But I blame her. My mother was actually born in Papua New Guinea. Her father was a pilot and he was flying and based over in Lae in Papua New Guinea. So she was born and raised there until about the age of 8. Then at some point later on, she actually ended up in Nauru because that's where his next posting was for a number of years. So she told me the most fascinating stories, which she says she can't remember telling me, but they made a big impression on me, of going to the market and going shopping in Lae, and they had a home help that would support them, and she had a close relationship with, I'm not sure the term they use, but like an ayah or a nanny. And I found that just so fascinating, thinking about the other, living within the other, a country that is different to the one you know. And I thought, what an amazing experience. And it inspired me to want it for me. But then it's taken me until the age of 41 to have the opportunity for myself. But I'm so grateful that I can offer it to my children now. So when I heard my mum talk about she said she was shopping one day and this gentleman came in and he was a local, and the idea of a shop was quite a foreign idea in some parts of Papua New Guinea at that time. And so this gentleman just walked in and started grabbing things off the shelves. And then he opened a can of tuna and then just ate it right there in the shop. And my mum said she just sort of stood there stunned watching, with her mum going, just and
Wow.
So the idea of different cultures and different ways of living, and I'm fascinated by it, and I can't wait to go and have that experience for myself and my children, because we are about to move to West Africa.
Woohoo! Here we go.
It's finally happening. Visas have arrived. They are in the passport.
Yes.
Tickets are booked.
It's getting real.
It's getting real. So, it's taken us a little while to end up with the actual outcome of we're going global, but it's actually happening this time.
Woohoo!
Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome.
So I'll just explain that we will ask a guiding question like one does in the classroom, but we're not going to ask you to answer that whole guiding question. We'll ask some smaller questions to get to the specifics. Let me start by asking the guiding question, which is, how did you use tenacity, grit, and perseverance in your quest to become an international educator? So let me break that down for the initial piece with what got you started thinking about being an international educator in the first place?
So, I actually had a cousin who did this first.
Mm.
She's a cousin through marriage, and we reconnected because she was coming into teaching as a slightly mature age person, and she ended up teaching in an amazing school that was doing all of the latest cutting edge implementation of everything that was amazing in education. And through that, she learned that actually there's an amazing whole sector called the international teaching sector that you might be interested in. And then from that, she joined Search Associates, and she ended up getting placed in Vilnius, Lithuania.
Cool.
And she's been there ever since, 5-6 years. And so
Wow.
that's how I first heard about it.
And adding to that question, what were a couple specifics when you chatted with her that you said, hey, that really gets me going? So what were some specifics?
So in terms of when she was already there, I love that all the time she was engaged with whatever was best practice. She was looking at the best ways to teach kids, the best ways to support them, the best ways to ask them questions and challenge them. And just everything seemed to be what I believed education could be and should be. But she was teaching in a place where everyone was on board with that idea. And I just found that absolutely fascinating. And through that, I guess I found out about the IB, which I already knew because the school I used to teach at, a private independent school in Victoria, Australia, they had an IB stream, which was my first introduction to it. But seeing her in it made me realize that it was as good as I thought it would be.
It's very true. And you hit on a theme that several of our kind of newcomers to international ed talk about. It's that phrase, it's what education should be. And we're fortunate that we get to go out and work in these international schools. They're not all perfect, but in many cases, so many structural and systematic things are in place to really help you leverage your skill set and be the best you can be. And then they're supporting you through the whole process.
I'm so excited at that idea.
Oh
It
my
is. It's
gosh.
such a community. Yeah, we love it.
All right. So let's go. There's so many steps in what you've experienced the last several years with international education. So what were some initial steps after you were talking to this family friend, family-in-law that helped you learn more about international education?
I guess the first step that I took was I joined Search Associates. So I've got a wonderful associate in the country who runs the Australian branch, and he was amazingly supportive. I guess, so 2019, my husband and I decided we've got 2 children, and at that stage they were about 6 or 7 and then 9, 10. And we thought that's a pretty good age. Everyone's out of nappies. Let's grab them and let's take them out into the world. And so I did a very, very exciting fair in Melbourne. There were, oh, goodness me, there were 200, 300 teachers interviewing for positions, and there were over 100 schools. So it was very vibrant, very exciting. I had about 10 interviews, I think, and I was getting offers, and I had about 6 offers, I think.
Wow.
And I had HR teams pressuring me in elevators to accept their offer.
Wow.
I was going to hotel rooms and having second interviews and, being pressured to, we really want you. And I was holding out for the best offer. And it was an incredible experience to feel so sought after and to feel like I had gifts and talents to share with the world. So that was our first attempt at going overseas. Unfortunately, as we all know what happened in 2020, the world broke.
Right.
Yes.
And so I actually didn't get to go. I ended up working remotely for 6 months in a packed up house, homeschooling 2 children at my dining table with a 3-hour time
Wow.
difference, teaching to China through a computer screen, watching other people run my classes,
Oh, my.
wrote all the curriculum, and after 6 months of no visa, which was not their fault, not my fault, it just was the nature of the pandemic and visas not arriving and being generated, we agreed to part ways, and I was paid out, and we had to regroup and make a new decision for our future. So that was our first go at it.
Wow. That's amazing.
So I guess after that, we had to pivot and make a decision. And so we thought, okay, let's try one more time. So this time I actually secured another position. This one was through ISS, which was ISS and Schroll. They had joined. That's two other agencies.
Right.
Yep. So that was back when they were joined, and they were running virtual fairs. So I actually did a virtual fair, and that's how I met a lovely school in Beijing that offered me a contract. So I'd accepted that. And again, the delays started, and they started to talk about, would you work online? Would you come without your family? And I said, no. I'm not doing this again. That's a hard no. I said, if you can't get us there, let's just agree to part ways amicably at this point, and you look for someone that's easier to get into the country or someone local, and I'll accept the loss. And so that's what we did. They were kind, though. They paid us out for all visa fees and things like that, which was generous, I thought.
Oh, yeah, that's very nice. But also, I was going to say that, first of all, I think you were wise to take that tack. But I think also that a lot of schools in China must have been in that kind of situation where they're just really, really trying to offer someone. And then the person says, I just can't do that. I've got the family, or I've got whatever reason that I don't want to be stuck over there. Maybe you have parents back in your home country that are aging, or maybe, are a little bit poorly. And during lockdown, a lot of people that David and I know that were working in China could not get home for particular family situations, or had to quit their job, could leave but couldn't come back. And so it was a big challenge. So I think you were wise to turn that down.
Yeah, thank you. It felt like the decision that needed to be made.
So one of the themes here, when we were talking off mic, are about character strengths. And Audrey shared a couple here at the start. And what you're doing there is really setting healthy boundaries. I'm trying to picture what it would be like, again, to be new to international education, and you want to support that school, you want to be a team player, but sometimes as caregiving people and very empathetic, we can go too far. So I just, as folks are listening, be thinking, what are takeaways as we hear Jessica's story? And here's a big one, is setting good boundaries, have very good communication on what's expected, and then what they will do, what you will do. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So that's a big takeaway I'm hearing.
Yeah, and if I can just piggyback on that, these international schools are people. They are looking for people who are going to fit into their community. And so they're going to do everything they can, but they tend to be empathetic and thoughtful and accommodating. So I'm glad that was your experience too.
Absolutely. I have only positive things to say about both the schools in China who employed me. Both of them, paid me out. They covered all of the fees. They supported me to work remotely. The first school, they, supportive with the time difference. They were really, really wonderful. So I was very grateful that everything I'd heard about it being a wonderful sector has been true for me.
Most excellent. All right. So, Jessica, one of our themes is doing lots of research. What are some other ways besides joining the recruiting agencies that you learned about international education?
I joined Facebook groups. So there's one about teachers overseas. There's one about traveling with children overseas, moving with children overseas for as an expat. So I joined all of those groups, and I got asked lots of questions and started thinking about all of the different elements. So, how do you pack an entire life into 10 suitcases? I wanted to sort of narrow it all down. I'm a big reader, so I bought some books on international education. Particularly, I was intrigued by the idea of what I was about to do to my children, and the experience, pros and cons for them, and understanding it. And so I learned about the term third culture kids, or cross-cultural kids as it's being rebranded now. And I bought a book which I think is sort of the ultimate book on third culture kids. And I read that and I weighed it up and I thought, no, I still think it's a really beneficial thing to do for children. And I think that the pros outweigh any potential cons. I know that I think you both have children that you've had overseas.
Yeah,
I'm assuming you would agree that it has been more pros than cons.
I think so.
Yeah, go ahead, Audrey.
So the kids are more broad-minded, adaptable, and flexible. They embrace diversity because that's more what they've known more than whatever you call it, mono, culturism. And I think that they're just so broad-minded and open-minded. I think it's been a benefit. David, how about you?
I'm so intrigued by your family history, Jessica, because I have a son who's a physics teacher who's looking to go overseas to continue the lifestyle that he enjoyed so much. So I kind of wonder with your children, you'll see how things roll. But if they become more globally minded and one or two of them wants to be involved in education, that maybe, who knows, maybe one of them will go on to become an international educator as well. So my second son, Maxwell, the physics teacher, just this summer, he's going to China to teach at a STEM camp, and then he's going to Japan for 2 weeks before he comes back to the U.S. and gets working on his application process to go overseas. So, yeah.
So he could be hot on your heels.
Very true.
Yes, I am hoping that my children will enjoy it and that maybe they might end up staying global if that's their journey. I know that this is my third attempt going overseas, but this one's happening. I had discovered your podcast and also ITP, the other podcast.
Yep,
we love
The
ITP.
other podcast. Bum, bum, bum. Don't worry, we're friends. We're friends.
I read Greg's book.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
As well. I bought Greg's book. That was actually quite validating, though, because I'd put so much time and energy into researching how to do this. And I had used Jacqueline Millay. So,
Yay.
Wow.
Yeah, she is.
The whole
I've got the whole team behind me. She redid my cover letter and my CV. I think you guys put me onto her, or ITP, one of you. She's brilliant. I can't recommend her services enough. I recommend her to a lot of friends. And I think I just thought to myself, you know what? We decided, so I guess, linking back to our story is that we decided to have one more go at this. Pandemic has, eased. We had moved states, bought a house, put the kids in a new school. Things are going pretty well, but we still had itchy feet. And I said to my husband, shall we try one more time? What do you think? And so I thought, I'm throwing everything at this. So I used Jacqueline. I listened to yours and ITP's podcast. I bought Greg's book. I re-engaged with Search Associates. I read everything that Search Associates puts out for do this before the interview, prepare this, read this. I researched the schools. I joined the International School Review, but I took it with a grain of salt because I know that being anonymous, that there are sometimes some people on there who are a little bit disgruntled. But I was advised by Jacqueline to do it, but to look at it and only look for patterns. And if there's a pattern, could be a good question for an interview. And so I had that in the back of my mind, that every school I was going to be meeting, I'd looked up their schools, and it might have prompted me to ask a question, but it wasn't going to be a barrier to me not willing to meet with a school. So I felt like I wanted there to be no stone unturned in this last round. And reading Greg's book, actually, I realised that everything he recommended I was already doing, and I'd already done. Probably the best takeaway, though, I have from this final experience where I've landed a contract, I've got a visa and I'm going, this is really happening. What I take from that is actually I had to persevere, but I also had to be, what would you call it, gently persistent. So something I hadn't done before is really followed schools following the interview process by just staying on their radar.
Smart.
So, and Greg recommends this in his book. And so that was the one thing where I went, yeah, I did actually, I get that. I take that point because when I interviewed with this school in West Africa, when I went to the Search Associates Fair just last year to get this position, they said to me, look, it's really competitive. We're about to go to Bangkok and London, and we're going to keep interviewing, and we're on 3 different online platforms. So we'll let you know. And that was sort of disheartening, but it wasn't a no. And so I thought, right, I'm just going to stay on their radar. So the principal was lovely. He's Australian. So we got along really well and we had that in
Yay.
common, which was lovely. And he's committed to Africa. He said, I've been here 20 years. He said, once you get Africa in your blood, you won't leave.
It's
And so I
true.
sent him a Christmas card. I wished him Happy New Year. I checked in when I checked the dates of the fairs, and I sent him, I hope the fair went really well. I remain interested. I hope you're doing well. And I just gently kept that up. And then after, it was probably a month after I'd interviewed, he asked me to attend an online second interview, this time with the curriculum principal. And so I did that interview, which went really well. And then it took another 2 or 3 weeks, I think, and they called me for one final interview with the executive principal, and he had a final few questions, and then he made an offer. But from end to end, it was a good nearly 2 months.
Wow. And that's such a huge takeaway for our listeners, to stay on the radar and just do it in a light touch way, but let them know you're out there and you want to stay connected. And it's much better than if they don't hear a word from a candidate and that candidate is someone that is in their final group. That, I'm sure, kind of lessens that person's stature. So good on you.
I think it also sort of says, I really am interested in your school. I wasn't just saying so.
Yes.
I really have, as you said, you'd researched these schools and you were following up probably with a bit of an idea about what their school was all about.
I definitely did a lot of research on the school, and I actually bought a book on West Africa. I'm a drama history teacher, so as a history teacher, I was fascinated to know more about the history of that part of Africa. And I found it's got some darkness to it, obviously, but it was fascinating to learn about, the history of the area and the way so many different colonial influences had shaped that part of the world. And I was able to speak to that in my first interview with the executive principal. And I wonder how much of an impression that actually made. I like to think it was a good one. He's never mentioned it again. But in the interview, when I said, I'm actually reading a book about West Africa at the moment, he said, talk to me about that. What have you learned? And so I think that, like you're saying, Audrey, I think that did show that I did have an actual deep interest in this part of the world and that school. It wasn't just, I'll take anything. There's 20 schools, whoever pays me first. It wasn't like that. I had a genuine interest, and I think schools really, they look for that. They appreciate that.
Absolutely. So maybe you can tell us now that you have the job and you've thought about, and it's Yaoundé that you're going to?
We're going to Abuja, Nigeria.
Abuja, that's right. Yes. Okay.
It's a diplomatic capital.
Okay, right. And it's one of the ones that was in our sports league when we lived in Dakar, Senegal. So that's pretty cool. Question here, two-sided question, and answer whatever works for you. What are you most excited about, and what are maybe some of your concerns?
I'm very excited at the idea of being in a place which I hope, from everything I can garner about this sector of education, will be very professional. I like the idea that professionally we'll be supported. My school gives us a professional development budget, which we can choose to spend across 2 years. So you can bank your budget. Flights are a little bit more expensive. Leaving from Abuja, being the diplomatic capital, it's a little bit, maybe there's not as many airlines that are flying from there, so flights are a bit more expensive. So that's part of the reason why they let you bank your professional development budget. But I was chatting in handover with the lady who's leaving at the moment, and she was saying, oh yeah, we went to Sweden and did an amazing PD. It was really great.
Nice.
Just, my mind was blown. I just went, oh my gosh, I could book and go anywhere to any amazing PD, and I love PD. So that was very exciting. I'm looking forward to being able to be in another country, not just for a holiday, but to actually really see it and really know it. But I guess the flip side of that as well is I'm concerned about how we will live there. So I know that there will be some security concerns that we will have to pay attention to. I'm hoping, though, that they're not so much of a barrier that we can't go and do things. I'm hoping we can go, right, Saturday morning, let's go out to the market and go to a market and book a driver and go into town. We're only 15 minutes out. I'm really hoping that I love travel. I love seeing places, but I always want to do the off the beaten track stuff. So for our honeymoon, we actually went to Malaysia, and I'd planned the entire trip myself. I love reading travel books, so I always read the travel book front to back twice.
Wow.
And I, in doing my research, planned our entire 2-week trip, going to different places all ourselves, so no tours or anything. And at one point, my husband and I were actually on a bus, and we were traveling down into the middle of Malaysia, and there were some ruins I wanted to go and see. And we were the only people who were Western. We were the only non-Muslim people traveling on this bus. It had no aircon. The aircon was broken. And my husband said to me years later, at that moment, he said, I looked at you and I went, I see what I have married now.
Oh, my.
Eyes wide open.
Lucky man.
Yeah.
He is a fortunate man.
And he's still hanging in, and yet he's also taking this leap with you, which we will talk to him in a little while. But all right, any more concerns or?
I'm concerned. Not concerned. I'm interested to see how my children will adapt. So my children are very confident, extroverted. They're reasonably bright, I think. So I think they'll do okay. They've told me they're excited about it. We've discussed it with them. Obviously, when we said, we're thinking of doing this, what do you guys reckon? But actually thinking about it and doing it are two different things. So I'm just going to be like this little cheerleader on the side, watching and and hoping that they thrive and that it's an amazing experience for them. I'm definitely willing to host lots of play dates so they can make lots of friends. So I'm starting to strategize how can I help them?
Right. There are some good books about these transitions. I'm not sure. David, do you want to talk about Doug Ota?
Yes. Yeah, I was about to say, Doug Ota is a real leader, and he supports, he's a psychologist, supports international schools in the whole big world of transitions. And he's set up an organization that helps schools with folks coming in and folks coming out. So I would definitely think about getting his book, and it's on our resource library at our site. But definitely check out that book. It's so great that you're doing all this research. And then one of the things we've spoken about, we haven't posted the episode yet, is just helping all of your whole family going through the stages of loss and getting used to the new place and letting go of the past things that were important, and then finding the new things that can get you excited, and then really supporting each other and sharing your emotions and validating that. It's a real process, because you're going to land there and you are such a go-getter. It's going to be exciting, but then there are going to be some stumbles along the way. That's just very normal.
Yes, I understand that there definitely will be a normal process of adjustment. And I've heard about what do they call it? That little 6-month window where it's all honeymoon phase, and then it clicks into reality and you go, you actually live here now.
Yeah.
you don't go home. This is your new home. So I've got that on my radar. And, I'm thinking about already, I've been looking up theatre groups that I could potentially join or go and watch. And my daughter, actually, she's only 9, but she's been doing internet research, and she's really interested in cheerleading. She loves dancing and things. And she said, Mum, there's a cheerleading group in Abuja. I really would like to go along and check it
Cool.
out. I said, okay, we'll go in and
Good
have a
for
look.
her. That's great. What a great way to make inroads into the community as well. Meet some non-school people. That's cool. Good for her.
Fantastic. So you do have quite the going global story. And at the end, we're going to share how people can learn more about you and what you're up to. And you've got a really interesting article up at Medium, and that's going to be in the show notes. So we've kind of jumped around a little bit here, but we are talking about a 4-year journey that's gotten you and your family to where you are today. And I'm just wondering if we can come back to some of those character strengths of tenacity and grit and perseverance, and just how you were able to exercise them in the ups and downs of the last 4 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess what I had to do once the pandemic broke out and it became clear that we were not going to move to China is I had to look at what were the gains that we had hoped to get out of going overseas. And my husband and I sat down and we made a list, and we wanted more financial stability for ourselves. We wanted to eventually buy a house. And because I was paid out as an educational consultant in one lump sum, we actually ended up with a house deposit. Which was a roundabout way of getting the house deposit that did not involve going overseas, but we still had it. So what we decided was, where we were living at the time in Melbourne, Australia, houses are quite expensive. But years ago, my husband and I had actually met in far north Queensland. I was sent up here to work, and that's where we met. And I said to him, you know what? If we can't move overseas, why don't we just move somewhere? And guess what? I've done some research. We could afford a house. So why don't we move there and buy a house? And so I guess that's that story of continuing to persevere with, well, what are our life goals? What else could this next step be? And I think we all learned to embrace the pivot during the pandemic, didn't we? Mm-hmm. And so we pivoted. And we jumped on a plane and we moved 40 hours north of where we were living. We bought a house. But then once we settled in, we realized, for me, the thing that became a barrier is this town is the size of my old municipality back in Melbourne. And once I really wrapped my head around what that meant, I realized that if I wanted the flexibility to move, I'm in middle leadership in the arts, if I wanted the ability to move within schools, there actually weren't that many. And so once I started to look, I realized that there actually wasn't a position, for 2 years I've looked, that suited me. And so I realized that what I needed to do was go anywhere. And that's the point that I got to. And so I actually ended up, for the last 18 months, I've been living in another town during the week, away from my family. It's an hour and a half inland. And then I come home on the weekends.
Wow.
So that's been tough. Not ideal for a young family. I don't recommend it. However, from a career perspective, because I actually have had 10 years out of education where I've done a little bit of relief teaching to keep my registration the whole time, but I actually worked in museums for 6 years as a program developer, developing education programs, which were aligned to curriculum. So my office used to be the old Melbourne jail.
Of course.
And it was actually a really good blend, because I was a drama teacher writing and doing tours, but they were history based. So it worked on both of my strengths, which was lovely. And I did that part-time while the kids were little. And then I worked in local government for 3 years. So I was developing programs for the community, arts programs, which was such a privilege. But I realized in looking at life that life is phases, and you need to make different decisions for different phases. And what's right in one phase may not be right for another. And so living in Melbourne, we couldn't afford a house, but at least we were near my parents. That was a good phase, and that supported us emotionally, and it helped the children have grandparents present in their life. then we wanted something different, and we wanted to go and flap our little baby bird wings out there in the world. And so we started this journey, and we've ended up in North Queensland, and then now we're moving to West Africa. So I think continuing to look at, what do you want? What are your goals? But then what are the different ways you could achieve them? I think that's been something that my husband and I have done quite well.
Wow, you stated that so well. And it's life planning, right? And looking at your situation and saying, what is our goal? Are we reaching it? If we're not reaching it, what do we have to do differently? And for you, because you have this wanderlust and this almost embedded family trait to want to travel and see different places and have new experiences, that is the kind of modeling we want for everyone. Those are just great life skills. And so we can add that flexibility. That's another character strength that you have presented. And, I can only guess that your children are seeing this modeling, and this is hopefully they're going to pick up from mom and Tony, the dad, same thing. So good on you.
Thank you.
So now for something completely different, as Monty Python would say, we have Tony, Jessica's husband, on the call. And let's ask Tony, first of all, this is really interesting. You're not a teacher. Oh, hi, Tony, first of all.
Hey, Audrey.
Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, no
You're
worries.
not a teacher at this point, right? But you're
Correct,
sort of
no.
making a pivot in order to kind of become part of this whole international teaching cycle.
Yes.
Tell us.
Yeah, I sort of came up with, when we started thinking about this, basically a retirement plan. And I sort of came along the lines of TAFE teaching. What do they call it? Vocational education.
Yeah.
That was going to be sort of my retirement plan. And then obviously when we got a little bit more serious about doing this, it made more sense to adjust slightly and have us both qualified so that we can continue this for the next 10 years.
Right. Now, but you're not working at the school in Abuja at this point, right? You didn't
Correct.
recruit.
No, I'm not allowed.
Okay.
No.
Okay. All right. So, but maybe the next one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
But
So
and
that's what we'll work
also,
towards.
yeah, if you're looking at something like design technology, there's a possibility maybe a lot of these schools have after school clubs and things. There's maybe a possibility.
Most definitely. Yeah.
Or robotics, or all those types of things are in high demand. I was telling Jessica off mic. So.
Yeah. I mean, I should be able to help out at least in some form of fashion.
Right.
Amongst trying to do my teaching degree.
Right. Now, okay, but for the moment, you're what we call a trailing spouse. You're coming along
Correct.
for the ride. You aren't working directly.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fun in itself. So, along those lines, with this really quite big pivot, what are some things that you're really excited about? And then following that, maybe, do you have any concerns?
I'm really excited that we go and see the world to some degree with our kids. That's obviously, Jess has done a bit of traveling, but I haven't done really any throughout my life. And neither did my parents really. So to change it up in a big way is exciting.
Uh-huh.
I'm looking forward to seeing parts of the world that we wouldn't normally get to see. It would cost an arm and a leg to go and see. But obviously there are certain parts of the world that can be a little bit daunting, and Africa has some unusual comments and responses from people, especially those that have actually been there. They're like, well, just make sure you...
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a worry, but at the same time, we've just now spoken about it, and we're not going to let it limit us if we can.
Good. Yeah. I think a lot of times my experience, and I think David would echo this, has been that when you're there, it feels a lot less scary than how people portray it from the outside. A lot of times, particularly the news, of course, sensationalizes things, but also a lot of times, you arrive there. Well, first of all, you talk to people who are already there and they say, oh, that's not such a biggie. And, we're used to that or what have you, that's kind of just become part of our lives. And so I think, and I hope that will be your experience as well. All
Same.
right. Yeah. Any other comments or things you want to tell us about?
I think that's yeah. I'm just looking forward to getting there and settling everyone in and just taking it as we go.
Yeah.
Take it all in.
That's cool. In fact, I would say also for the kids, it will be really nice that you'll be at home and can be that sort of grounding piece for them, I think. So,
Correct. Yeah. And
yeah.
I guess that's the other thing. I guess part of doing this as well is that we're together.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're living together. We're staying together. We're working together to a degree, and it will be a bit easier on the relationship between us,
right,
than it has been for the last nearly 2 years. So
yes, with Jessica working in a different city, that's a challenge, no doubt.
It has been.
Well, thank you so much, Tony, for joining us for a bit and having your side of the story.
Thank you.
And now let's hear from the kids.
Hi, Scarlett. Thanks for joining us. You're very brave. Audrey and I are halfway around the world, and we're super excited that you're taking some time to talk with us. So we have a two-part question. I'm going to ask you the first part is, what are you excited about in making your move, the family move, to West Africa?
I'm probably most excited that we get to travel the world, and not many people do. So I'm quite excited about that.
And we were hearing you've already done some research. What have you been learning about your new home?
Well, I've learned that they do cheerleading.
Yay.
Excellent. And that's such an important thing that's going to help you as you make your move, is to keep learning about what your new home's going to be like. So are there any other things that get you excited about your family's move?
I guess I just get to meet new people around the world. I get to speak and learn new languages.
Yeah. There's a chance that there's going to be
true.
people in your class who are from all different countries. It's very cool.
And then, like with most things in life, there's some things that maybe might not be so great that you might be worried about. And there might be some things about leaving your friends and your family. So what are some concerns that you have?
Well, they did tell us that when we go to Africa, there will be a lot of mosquitoes and they can make us very sick.
Mm-hmm.
That is true. You'll use probably some netting around your bed, and there'll be some medicine that you take. And after a while, that probably will become just a normal thing. Is there anything else, like in leaving your home there in Australia?
I guess I'm just a little bit further away from my family.
And one of the great things we have is, like we're doing it right now, the video conferencing, that you can really stay in touch and you can share stories and maybe send pictures and things like that will help your family learn more about your new life. So hopefully, and I'm sure that will be something you'll enjoy doing. All right, Scarlett, thanks for taking some time and chatting with us. And I'm really looking forward to following your mother's writing. She's got a place on the internet where she's going to write some stories about your travels. So I'm looking forward to that. So thanks.
Yeah.
So hi, Elliot. You are the older brother.
Hi, Audrey. Hi, David.
Lovely to meet you. Thank you for joining us. And we really wanted to get the whole family in on this because it's being kind of a family affair here. And I understand that you have a few things you are excited about as you consider the move to Nigeria. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So I'd say the most exciting thing about moving to Nigeria would be how many different things will be there compared to Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And probably the most exciting would be all of the different people that I could meet.
Wonderful. All right then. And is there anything you're a little worried about, or things that you are going to be sad to leave behind in Australia?
The things that I'm sad to leave behind are probably my friends and all of the great teachers that I've had.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's hope that you have some great teachers in Abuja. That would be nice. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Elliot. And is there anything else you want to add, or you feel like you've mentioned all the things?
Yeah, I think I've mentioned all the things.
You're good? All right, cool. Well, thank you. Would you please pass the mic back to your mom?
So, as we kind of pull things together here, you've shared a lot of personal characteristics and ways you've kind of worked through some difficult times. So, kind of summarizing, how have you grown personally and professionally during the last 4 years of your efforts to be an international educator?
I think something I've done, which was actually a part of some trainings that I was offered, just as I was in local government actually, have really helped me as I've navigated the last 4 years, is I did my DISC training, and that's a personality type of training if people aren't aware of it. Another one that's well known is Myers-Briggs. I've done that as well. But the DISC training really helped me to realize that there are different personalities out there and that you're going to be encountering, and there's a lovely layman's version of the concept, which is called Surrounded by Idiots, which is a book that was published by the people who created the DISC personality testing.
Oh my goodness.
It's a lovely way of, as a layman, if you want to learn about these different personalities, you don't have to pay a huge fee and get a 40-page document. It's just a nice little way of learning about it. So I read that as well. And you start thinking in colors. You're either a red or you're a green or you're a blue or you're a yellow. And I found the last 4 years I have worked for China once, a second time, which didn't quite work out. I've left local government. I've gone back to relief teaching in Victoria during the pandemic, moved to far north Queensland, started working in a state school, then moved to a Catholic sector, then moved to an independent school. Then now I'm about to move to the American curriculum system and I'm moving to West Africa. So I've had a lot of change, but through that, it's really helped as I meet all these different people in all these different schools and all these different curriculum systems. As I engage with people, when I meet a blue personality that's very data orientated, rather than me going, oh, I just find those people so difficult, or I don't like this person, I reframe it and I go, oh, that's a blue. So a blue person needs data. They feel safe with data and they don't want to know how I am because that's not how they engage. What they want to know is, did I get my job done? Can I do the job? And show them the evidence. And then our relationship's going to go fine. I just need to see them where they are.
Yeah.
And so I found that really helpful as I've navigated all of this change. That's one key thing I think that I found helpful. I've also done some training in how to have difficult conversations. And I've been back in middle leadership and I've had to definitely draw upon that as I've had some difficult conversations with people in my own team, people I line manage. And I've realized that where I would have been afraid before, I now feel like I have the tools to have that conversation and to, the idea of it is to help someone to grow. And I'm a big believer that we can all grow and we can all learn from one another. And I love being able to support people to do that. And so that's probably something that I've really had in my little toolkit.
That's fantastic. And that will serve you well no matter what you do moving forward. And almost you sound like you're a life coach, because that's some of the things that David and I have been working on as we pivot into more of a life coaching kind of a situation.
I would just like to say, though, finding your podcast has actually helped me both personally and professionally. And I'm so grateful that the two of you do this. coming into this again, my husband and I went, all right, let's give it another go. I felt a little bit like, really, am I going to do this? Are we going to do it? And is it the right thing? And what I wanted is to tap into why it is the right thing and it is an amazing experience. And I wanted the validation. And so I went searching for podcasts, which is the first time I've even thought to open up Spotify and go, do they have podcasts on there? I actually don't know if they do. And so I was putting in international and education, and I found you and I found ITP, and I was driving an hour and a half to work. And so on the way, I was listening to your podcast, and it was so validating and exciting. And every time I drove, I went, you know what, grit your teeth, jump through the next hoop, get that visa done, get that house sold, get those boxes packed, because it's going to be worth it. So thank you.
Oh my goodness, that's so great. That's exactly why we're doing this, isn't it, David?
That's why we're doing it. Thank you.
All right. Well, hopefully our listeners will want to follow you, and you've mentioned something that you're doing that I think is very cool. So please tell us a little bit more about how people can follow you if they want to learn more about your pivot to the fabulous world of international education.
I would be very happy if people would like to follow me on Medium, which is a travel blog site that I've started writing on. It's a writing site, so there's all different topics on there. The time of each article, so how long it'll take you to read, is advertised. I've published my first article. It's a little bit long. It's a 7-minute read. I'm going to do lots of little small snapshot ones in the future. I like the idea of doing hey, I'm going to the market today, and put up some photos and tell a bit of a story of what a market in Abuja, Nigeria is like, because I've had so many people ask me about it. So I'd love if you'd put the link up to my profile on Medium, and people are welcome to have a read.
Absolutely.
I'm also happy for people to email me if they have any questions about how to do what we're doing, or any questions about Abuja. So it's jessica.ann.simmons@gmail.com.
Yeah, thank you for being so open for people to potentially reach out. But to me, reading that first article really ties so much together. You've shared multiple stories. So I say to folks, go to the show notes, click the link. I'm a Medium subscriber, so I've added you to my list. And like you just said, I'm really looking forward to hearing of your stories from, like, to me, going to markets is always one of the greatest things that you can do, right? Going to a wet market, for example, and getting your kids appraisal of seeing all those animals and such that are there, very fresh, and the best, vegetables and all the good stuff there too. So thank you to you, Tony, Scarlett, and Elliot for coming on. This has been really kind of neat for us. I think you're our first family, and we've got our first voices of children on the podcast. So thank you so much, and we really look forward to following your family adventures.
Thank you so much for having me. It was absolutely lovely to meet you both.
It was wonderful to meet you too, and your family, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for joining us today on Educators Going Global.
You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all the other usual suspects.
Please subscribe, like us, and leave a review on Apple and Spotify, and let your teaching friends know about us so we can grow our community.
Please reach out at educatorsgoingglobal@gmail.com and join our Facebook group, Educators Going Global, if you have ideas, comments, or wish to share a Going Global story of your own.
You can also find us on Instagram at Educators Going Global.
Please visit our website as well, www.educatorsgoingglobal.com. All our podcast episodes are on there by topic, along with blog posts, Going Global stories, and our ever-growing resource library. For now, this is Audrey
and David,
inviting you to travel,
teach,
and connect with us.